Hello and welcome to the Stuw, a podcast where we explore a variety of topics about youth ministry, church, life, philosophy, theology, and all sorts of stuff. I'm Josh Klein. I am the youth pastor at Crosspoint Bible Church in Omaha, Nebraska, and today we are going to look at our exit strategy. No, not as a podcast. We're just getting started here, but as people are being stuck in quarantine and social distancing, the question is, how do we think about our future? How should we reintegrate into everyday life? How are things going to get back to normal? Are they going to get back to normal right away? Are we going to have to take our time? What is it going to look like in the future? And if you haven't asked those questions, I think those questions are going to start being asked more readily here in the coming weeks. Here in Nebraska, we have our governor reopening the economy, at least a soft opening on May 4th. So that's next Monday. And the question being asked is, what does that look like? And for a lot of churches, especially our own, what does it look like? How do we renormalize? How do we reopen? And how do we worship together? So in this week's podcast, which is the 4th of the month, usually it's reserved for big questions, big life questions, philosophy, theology, all sorts of things. But today, I want to focus on the biggest question that's on many people's minds, and is on my own mind, is what does normalizing or normal look like when this is all said and done? Today, I'm going to get into some ideas of what that could look like. But I want to let everyone know, including myself, that as I'm talking about this, I'm really talking this through with you and with myself, and I don't have the answers, but it's just some things I've been putting into practice and talking about on my own that I thought, well, might as well share that with those who would like to hear it here on the Stuw. So as we look at that, I myself am wrestling with this question in regards to what does it look like to get back to life post-COVID-19? Is it possible? And does it look like anything like pre-COVID-19? And I've been wrestling with that for a while. And part of the reason I've been wrestling with that for a while is because in a lot of ways I feel like let's just get onto it. Let's get this going so that we can get back to the way things were. And something I've had to realize is that I don't think that that's realistic, getting back to the way things were, at least not for a little while. And I've been wrestling with that because I've heard people say that, and I'm kind of slow when it comes to the uptake on those sorts of things. And I've been like, what do you mean? I'm ready to go to restaurants. I'm ready to go hang out with people. I'm ready to go to church. But the longer this social distancing and this quarantine goes on, I think the more difficult it is to get back into everyday life, even if things are normal health-wise. And as far as COVID-19 goes, we just don't know. We don't know if there's going to be a second wave. There likely will be. We don't know if hospitals are going to see an uptick in people admitting themselves. We don't know exactly what's going to happen because all of the models right now, in the past and right now in multiple countries, show different things. We don't know exactly what to expect, and that's where some of that anxiety comes in. So today, as we talk about what it means as Christians, as a Crosspoint Bible Church, to get back into everyday life, I'm going to get a little bit personal to myself today because I can only think of this anecdotally, really, for myself. I can't think of it for you. I can just talk about the way that it has affected me and the way that we're choosing to move forward as a family. And maybe this is something that's affecting you as well, and hopefully this is helpful. So before this all started, obviously, I'm the youth pastor at Crosspoint Bible Church. My wife works with a lawyer who has cerebral palsy. She's brilliant, but has to do some physical things for her because of that. So in many ways, my life stayed the same during this whole crisis. I still went into work every day. It's hard to go at home and work on things with 3 little kids around. My wife still went into work because working with somebody with cerebral palsy, you can't really do that from a distance, and so she goes in and works as well. So in those ways, those things stayed the same because we didn't have a shelter-in-place order in Nebraska. I still went into the office. So did my wife. In a lot of ways, things stayed the same. However, there are many things that drastically took a turn in our life as well. Even though work life is a little bit the same, our our kids' lives are in a little bit of upheaval. My son went to Grace Abbott Elementary School, and they stopped meeting from March into the end of the school year. And so he had to do classes on Zoom. We had to figure out what that looked like. My daughter was taking dance lessons. She had to do those things on Zoom. My other daughter, 2 years old, starts potty training in the midst of all of this. So a lot of life change. And our kids on Tuesdays and Wednesdays were usually taken care of by their grandparents. But because their grandparents are part of the at-risk group because of immune deficiencies and also age, they were in quarantine since before this all began, and that meant childcare was something that we had to adjust. And we did, and it wasn't ideal in a lot of ways, but we've been getting it done with the help of other people that love us and care about us. And I can only imagine what other people are going through. And that's just the personal aspect of it. As far as job life, I'm one of the blessed people that here at Crosspoint, we didn't experience a huge dearth of financial giving, and so I'm able to keep my job. But I'm not as 22 million people in the nation, including some people that I know personally and that I'm related to, weren't so blessed to have that. But my job also changed drastically. As a youth pastor, I went from in-person meetings to Zoom meetings, having to figure out how to work Zoom, having never done that before, doing youth group live on a video stream on YouTube on Sunday nights, doing varieties of short videos, trying to figure out if it's even content that people want, content that people ask. I've always thought maybe I was a little bit creative, but trying to reimagine those things and see it, when you put it out there for the world to see if people actually like it, because frankly, you don't know, and you think maybe this is only entertaining to me or this is only meaningful to me, and other people won't see it as that. But we had to remain faithful, reimagine what it meant to do work during this time, and that might end up sticking with us even as we come out of the COVID crisis. So that leads me to the big question of today. As you think of as you hear the way I'm trying to think through these things, the big question is, what now? What now? What do we do now? We have adjusted to self-quarantine. We've adjusted to social distancing. What now? And if you're like me, there's a certain comfort level in the way things are right now. And I'm not saying that everyone enjoys life as it is right now, but going 2 months into this, you start to develop some sort of rhythm, even if it's a rhythm you don't want to keep. It's just a rhythm you start to develop, and you know what to expect. You know what's around the corner. This is something you've done for 2 months. And when you realize the fact, as I did, that life is not going to go back to pre-COVID-19 levels right away, you start to think, and not necessarily with anxiety, but with uncertainty about what the future entails. And you might find that there were some things about quarantine life and social distancing life that you actually kind of enjoyed. As much as maybe we're not supposed to admit that, we kind of enjoyed. And I'm, again, getting a little bit personal. I know I do. Honestly, right now, Sundays are a bit less chaotic in the Klein household. They are less rushed. They're more laid back. The kids are starting to adjust and understand expectations that come with it. It's nice to move at our own pace in the morning as a family of 5. And we've been able to experience worship in a very meaningful way right now because of the hard work that Pastor Isaiah and the board and other people in ministry have done at our church. We're able to experience worship at our own pace, even if it's just as our family in the house together. And, I don't know, maybe you've had some people you're watching with, maybe it's on social media or neighbors that you've invited over. You've decided to get a little variety in your preaching every week. Maybe you, like us, have settled into a rhythm that carries with it a little less stress and a lot less of an expectation. And I think that's where we are. That's where we are as a family. And realizing that, and I was just talking to my wife the other day, it's going to be hard getting back to let's get to church before 9 o'clock. Because we could start whenever we want, because our church doesn't stream live. We record and it posts at 9, and you can just watch it anytime after that. We can wait till 10 o'clock if we want to have a long brunch or want to sleep in a little bit. It is appealing in a lot of ways. In a lot of ways, it is appealing. That's not to say we don't miss church. We do. We miss it terribly. I miss youth group, Sunday school. I miss having people besides family over to the house on a regular basis. But We've also developed a deeper relationship with our neighbors during this time as well. Our family has grown closer together in a lot of ways. So maybe you're like me and you look at life post-quarantine and you realize that you're excited for it, but you're also uncertain about it to some certain extent too, because you've gotten into a rhythm of life and what it looks like during this time. You know it can't stay like this all the time, but that uncertainty is rearing its head again. And it's not just about the uncertainty of coronavirus or COVID-19, but it's the uncertainty of what does life look like now post-COVID-19. Because like I said, maybe you've come to the realization like me that life is not going back to normal right away. And whatever it is that you're going through right now, I think we all can empathize or sympathize at least with each other to a certain extent. We've all experienced it, and now we're looking at life reopening to a certain extent. But what does it even look like? What does it look like to have restaurants only at 50% capacity? What does it look like to try to still practice social distancing in a church building if we're able to meet? And how appropriate is it for us to start meeting right now? And what do we do with at-risk groups? And all that sort of stuff is flowing through our minds. That anxiety can get wrapped up again. And I'm not going to talk at a church level right now because I don't really have the ability to do that because we haven't really been able to talk about that at a leadership level yet. But at a personal level, the first thing that I think is something that I personally struggle with, and maybe some of you might as well, and that's this idea of extending grace to one another as we all phase back into life at different rates. To recognize that this is going to happen at a different pace for a lot of people for a lot of different reasons. Some might think that this whole thing was a gigantic waste of time, that we should jump right back into it, that this thing was not as deadly as we thought, and we need to congregate in restaurants, we need to go to sporting events, and let's help our local economy. And I can totally understand that way of thinking. Others, on the other hand, might be hesitant to do anything for a long period of time, including going to church. And perhaps that's because of personal health issues, maybe their age, or requests from their family, or simply because they are more cautious individuals. They maybe have a burden of knowledge as healthcare providers, or they have been reading articles that have ratcheted up anxiety, or understand the trends and really want to be cautious. There are two different ways of thinking, and the temptation right now, and the way the media is portraying these two ways of thinking, is that they are diametrically opposed to one another and cannot coexist. If you go out and you support the local economy and you try to live life that way, you must not care about people, and you must be okay with people going to the hospital, people dying. On the other hand, the other side says, well, but if you don't go out and you don't do those things, and you don't spend your money and you don't go to work, then you don't get to experience the benefits of our economy. You don't care. You're just somebody who wants our economy to fail. And I think as a church, for our society's sake, and for our church's sake together, we cannot afford to look at life that way when we get back together. When we see different people from our church taking different approaches, we need to exercise a measure of grace. The temptation on both sides of that dynamic is to demonize the other person. To the person that thinks reopening can be dangerous and sees a friend from church starting to go back to life as it was before in a myriad of ways, it's unhelpful and even hurtful to cast aspersions on them, assuming that they don't care about the health of others, or that they are completely ignorant. Maybe they aren't ignorant. And the same goes for vice versa. See, this is a perfect opportunity to exercise living out convictions without imposing them as moral law to those around us, especially in the church. In other words, let's not get pharisaical with our point of view in this situation. As long as a person isn't intentionally going out of their way to be careless, or as long as an individual isn't trying to control the way that you live your life, give them grace to live according to their convictions. There's a Romans 14 sort of issue here. That leads us to another practical issue as we look at the reintegration of church life, and it's this. I think as we take stock of things in this coming age of reopening our economy, we should ask ourselves, both personally and professionally and spiritually, what can I let go of? our culture of busyness is next to godliness has taken a hit. We've realized that busyness isn't necessarily next to godliness. There's a lot of businesses that are functioning with people working from home because people can be trusted because most people work hard. Sometimes you hear the things like, I just put my nose to the grindstone, the grind never stops, just always busy, busy, busy. It's said with some sort of pride or arrogance or some sense of importance. But with the busyness of our economy coming to a grinding halt, we found that there are ways to live life absent the busyness. There are things that are negotiable. Not hard work. Hard work is always important. It has a principle, but manufacturing that busyness in our lives to look more important, and we do it. We do it a lot in our culture. Maybe that's something that we can reassess as we look at reopening. Perhaps living a life with less time constraints and more availability to your walk with God and to others in relationship, realizing that you were able to invest in more relationships and did not have to spend so much time in front of the computer screen. However, there's another side to that could have bred some laziness during this time. Maybe you sat home and binge-watched Tiger King on Netflix during this time. I'm not recommending the show. I haven't even seen it, but apparently it's a big deal. Maybe you are tempted to see church as optional, as worshiping at home in front of your flat-screen TV seems to get you just as good of preaching and a less chaotic schedule on Sunday mornings. And I encourage all of us to guard our hearts against spiritual complacency that we never thought would come. We thought we'd really want to be back together, and we might be seeing the opportunity to come back together here soon with, I actually kind of like sleeping in. I actually kind of like being able to do the things that I want to do on my own pace. I was just talking with my wife the other day about that it's going to be hard to get out the door. We need to start preparing now to be ready to get to church so that when services start, we're ready. So my encouragement to all of us during this time is to start preparing ourselves to go back to church as soon as we physically can. And that physically can is going to look different for different people. I think that's important to note. For some, that might be sooner than others. Even if governmental restrictions are lifted, that conviction piece, when you have family to consider, you have people to consider that are invested in your life, what does it look like? Regardless, let's not operate it under this new idea that this is new normal. It was never supposed to be new normal. Don't let it come to that. Okay, so we looked at grace, busyness, going to church. Finally, I want to touch on the fact that we all need to embrace the fact that while shutting down was a quick decision that was made rapidly, reintegrating will not be. There will be different people going at different paces, but ultimately our government and economy will also adjust as a process, not in a moment. Things won't ever go back to being pre-COVID-19. No matter what we think, if the virus is a real threat or not, too much has happened, too much has changed. Things aren't going back to the way they were, and maybe that could also be a good thing. The governor of Nebraska has announced a soft reopening of the state, and I'd like to encourage all of us, and I think we need to do this as a family as well, as I'm encouraging all of us to do this, is to sit down and make some priority lists. Think about life over the past 2 months and ask this question spiritually, personally, and professionally. What do I need to let go of, and what do I need to hold on to? What can become my new normal going forward, our new normal going forward? For myself, this has been a challenging time spiritually, but it has also opened up new resources I can use for myself and my family to go closer in our relationship with God. Personally, I won't take for granted the nanas and the papas that help, and that means so much to us. I'll try my best to be present in the moments with my kids. Also, personally, I find an opportunity to talk through life with my wife in a new way that should be an ongoing thing as well as some other relationships that has deepened and formed bonds during this time. Professionally, I feel like we've taken steps forward technologically in ministry, and we can't let that fall backwards, but we also can't let that become our focal point. So finding the balance of how to reintegrate more social media without social distancing is important, both to youth ministry and to ministry at large. What are things that we can do, not to appeal to people, but to reach people for the gospel of Christ? I think we may have been equipped in new ways during this time. Use the wisdom that God has given us to find that. What are things you will carry forward with you? What are the long-term changes you need to hold on to? What are the short-term necessities you need to let go of? Sort of like watching church services on Sunday morning instead of going to church. You need to let go of that. But perhaps not being so stressed out in the mornings about getting ready and looking the perfect way to present yourself perfectly at church, that could be something that could be let go. What are some comforts that you came to rely on during this time that you need to challenge to move forward? You might be comfortable in being isolated. Overall, what is the wisest and godliest way to move forward in this unprecedented time? Ask God. James chapter 1 says, He will be faithful to respond if we seek wisdom in times of trial. And even this reintegration process will be a time of trial that we can seek wisdom in as well. And you can make an effort to realize that some people, and can you make an effort to realize that some might have different convictions about timing, type of reintegration, and how would you best desire to show them love and grace? Well, hopefully this challenged you. Again, these are just questions. They're not answers to them necessarily, but just being able to start to process these things as we move forward in this idea of reintegration and what it means to reopen, not just to the economy, but our lives in a new way. And hopefully it's not daunting. There's not a lot of anxiety that comes with it, but there is some grace that can be established to move forward, that we don't operate in fear, but we operate in trust and love for each other. If we start to think of and answer these questions now and preparing for life after the pandemic now, rather than simply waiting for everything to end, because it's not just going to end like it began, it's going to take a while. If we start to ask these questions now, we can be better prepared to forge ahead personally and as a church in the coming months. I do hope you are all doing well. And a few things I can say for certain is that I miss interacting with everyone and that God is sovereign and continues to be in control. I'm Josh Klein, youth pastor of Crosspoint Bible Church. This is the Stuw. It's available in most places you will find podcasts, the church app, Crosspoint Bible Church app, Spotify, YouTube, Apple Podcasts, and more. I hope we all will be able to adjust to the real new normal in the coming months. And as always, we will see you in the Stuw next week.